The planet Verath 7 was not a beautiful place. It was dark, cold, and covered in thick fog that never seemed to go away. The trees were tall and black, with no leaves, just sharp branches that cut through the mist like claws. The ground was wet and soft, and every step made a quiet, sucking sound. The sky above was always gray, even during the day. At night, it was pure black, the kind of black that made people feel small and very, very alone. A small human colony sat near the edge of a wide forest. The buildings were simple metal walls, flat roofs, strong windows. About 4,000 people lived there. Farmers, engineers, miners, and their families. They had built this colony over 12 years of hard work. It was not perfect, but it was theirs. Commander Alara Voss stood on the roof of the command building and looked up at the sky. She was not a tall woman. She was lean and quiet, with short dark hair and gray eyes that always looked like they were watching something nobody else could see. She wore no medals on her uniform, even though she had earned many. She did not like things that made noise or drew attention. She had spent most of her military career learning how to disappear. Her soldiers called her Shadow Fang, not to her face, never to her face, but the name had spread through every human military base in the outer colonies. Shadow Fang, the officer who moved like smoke, the woman who finished missions before the enemy even knew they had started. She was staring at a fleet of ships sitting in orbit above Verath 7. They had arrived 3 hours ago. 12 warships, each one the size of a small city, black and red, shaped like the bodies of giant insects, with long sharp edges and rows of cannon ports that glowed a dark orange. They belonged to the Kyrath Empire, the most feared military force in the known galaxy. The Kyrath were ancient. They had been conquering worlds for over 3,000 years. They were tall, almost 7 feet, with thick armored shells that covered their bodies like natural battle armor. They had 4 arms, sharp claws, and eyes that could see in complete darkness. They hunted in packs, and they were fast, much faster than they looked. They had never lost a war. Not one. In 3,000 years of fighting across hundreds of star systems, the Kyrath had never been defeated. Every species in the Galactic Council knew this, and every species in the Galactic Council was currently panicking. Inside the command building, the Situation Room was full of noise. Holographic screens floated in the air, showing the Kyrath fleet, the colony layout, the sensor readings. Council ambassadors from 6 different species were talking all at once through the communication system. Their voices came from speakers on the walls, clicking, buzzing, whistling, all mixed together in a mess of fear. Ambassador Sarastow, a tall, thin alien who looked like a green praying mantis with silver eyes, was the loudest of them all. He stood in the center of the room, his long fingers moving fast as he spoke. "Commander Voss," he said, his translator working smoothly, "this situation is very clear. The Kyrath have made a formal demand. You must stand down your forces and open the colony to their inspection team. If you do this peacefully, they have agreed to allow the colonists to evacuate." Alara walked into the room slowly. She did not rush. She never rushed. She looked at the screens, then at Sarastow, then at the other ambassadors watching from their screens. "And if we don't?" she asked. Her voice was low and flat, like someone asking about the weather. Sarastow made a sound that his translator called distressed. "Then they will destroy the colony from orbit. Commander, please understand, this is the Kyrath. No one fights the Kyrath. It is not done. It cannot be done. The only logical response is to surrender and preserve lives." Alara looked at the tactical screen. She looked at the forest. She looked at the timeline showing sunset, which was in 41 minutes on Verath 7. The nights on this planet were long, almost 8 hours from full dark to first light. She turned back to Sarastow. "Get me a direct line to their fleet commander," she said. The room went quiet. Sarastow stared at her. "Commander, I strongly advise. Direct line now." One of her officers, a young man named Corporal Danny Marsh, worked the communication panel quickly. His hands were shaking slightly. After a few seconds, a new voice filled the room, deep, slow, and heavy, like stones grinding together. The Kyrath fleet commander's face appeared on the main screen. He was massive, old by Kyrath standards. His armored shell was dark gray, cracked in places from old battles, and his 4 eyes were a burning yellow-orange. He looked at Alara the way a person looks at something small they found on the bottom of their boot. "I am Vorath Kel," the voice said through the translator, "High Commander of the 7th Expansion Fleet of the Kyrath Empire. You are the human officer in charge of this colony." "I am," said Alara. "Then you have heard our terms. You will comply or you will be destroyed. We give you 1 hour to begin your surrender process." He paused. There was something like amusement in his voice. "We have done this many times, human. There is no version of this where you win. Be smart. Lay down your arms." Alara looked at him for a long moment. The room was completely silent. Every ambassador, every officer, every person watching the feed held their breath. Then she said, "Give me 1 night." Vorath Kel was still for a second. Then a low sound came through the speakers, something the translator identified as laughter. It was not a kind sound. It was slow and deep, and it made the walls vibrate slightly. Behind him, other Kyrath voices joined in. "1 night," he repeated like the words tasted funny. "The human wants 1 night," more laughter. "Very well, little soldier, we will give you your night. We have not had entertainment in some time." His eyes narrowed. "Enjoy your darkness. We will see you at dawn." The transmission cut. Sarastal turned to Alara with wide silver eyes. "Commander, what have you done? You cannot fight the Kyrath. You have 40 soldiers. They have 12 warships and thousands of ground troops." Alara was already walking toward the door. She pulled on her tactical gloves as she walked. "I don't need to fight their fleet," she said quietly. "I just need the night." She stopped at the door and looked back at Corporal Marsh. "Get the unit ready. Full shadow loadout. No lights, no sound signatures, no heat trails. Tell them we move in 30 minutes. She glanced at the window, at the sky that was already beginning to darken. "The forest will cover us. The fog will do the rest." She walked out. Marsh looked at Sarastal. The ambassador's thin mouth was open, his silver eyes blinking fast. "What does she mean?" Sarastal asked. "What is a shadow loadout?" Marsh stood up slowly and reached for his own gear. He looked a little pale, but there was something else in his face too, something steady. Something that looked almost like confidence. "It means," he said quietly, "that we're going hunting." Outside, the last of the light was fading from the sky. The fog was thickening in the forest. The black trees disappeared into the mist one by one, until there was nothing out there but darkness. And somewhere inside that darkness, 40 human soldiers began to move. The Kyrath landing ships came down like falling rocks, fast, loud, and heavy. There were 6 of them, each one big enough to carry 100 soldiers. They hit the ground about 2 kilometers from the colony's outer fence, in a wide clearing at the edge of the Black Forest. The ground shook when they landed. Trees bent from the force of the engines. Fog scattered in all directions, then slowly, quietly crept back in. The ramp doors opened. The Kyrath came out in perfect lines. They moved the way all predators move, controlled, smooth, aware of everything around them. Their armored shells were dark green and black, built for night environments. Their 4 eyes scanned the tree line without stopping. Every soldier carried a heavy plasma rifle and a short blade on each arm. They were disciplined, experienced. They had done this hundreds of times on dozens of worlds. Their ground commander was a veteran named Scarval. He was not as large as Vorath Kel, but he was faster, wiry, and sharp-edged, with scars across his chest plate from old battles. He had personally led the ground assault on 11 colony worlds. He had never needed more than 3 hours to break resistance and secure a target. He expected this night to be the same. He organized his troops into 4 scout teams of 20 soldiers each. He kept 40 in reserve at the landing site. He sent the 4 teams into the fog in different directions, 2 toward the colony fence, 1 along the eastern ridge, one into the forest itself to check for any human soldiers hiding in the trees. Standard procedure, clean and simple. The first team moved into the fog slowly, visors switched to thermal imaging. On thermal, warm bodies showed up clearly as bright shapes against the cold background. Humans were warm. They would glow like lanterns in the dark. The Kyrath had used this tactic on every world. Hiding was useless against thermal eyes. But there was nothing. The team moved deeper into the forest. The black trees rose above them like walls. The fog was thicker here, swirling around their boots. The ground was soft and wet. Every step made a small sound. Their team leader, a soldier named Krethan, checked his scanner. Nothing alive nearby. He signaled his team to spread out slightly and continue forward. They walked for another 3 minutes. Then the soldier at the very back of the line disappeared. There was no sound, no struggle, no warning. Krethan turned to check on his team and counted 19 soldiers instead of 20. He stopped. He looked back along the path they had walked. Fog, trees, nothing. He switched his visor to maximum range thermal and scanned in every direction. Nothing warm, nothing moving. He opened his comm. Team 1 to base, we have a missing soldier, last position. The soldier beside him disappeared. This time Krethan saw it, or he almost saw it. Something dark moved at the edge of his vision. Fast, low, silent. There and then gone, like a shadow that decided to become solid for 1 second and then changed its mind. He spun around with his rifle up and fired twice into the fog. The plasma shots lit up the mist in bright blue-white and then faded, leaving spots in his vision. Nothing, no body, no blood, no sound. Krethan was breathing hard now. Base, this is Team 1, 2 soldiers missing, contact unknown, no thermal signature detected, requesting. 2 more soldiers were gone. He was running before he finished his sentence. He shouted into the comm, calling the whole team together, pulling them into a tight circle back to back. They stood there in the fog with their rifles pointing outward and their thermal visors scanning and finding nothing. And then from somewhere in the dark ahead of them, they heard a sound. It was very soft. It was a human voice and it was counting. Low and calm and steady, like someone counting seconds before sleep. 4. Scarval heard the report from Krethan and felt something he had not felt in many years. It was not quite fear. The Kyrath did not call it fear. They called it alertness to threat. But whatever it was called, it was cold, and it was spreading through his chest like ice water. He pulled up the sensor feed from all 4 teams. Team 1 was bunched together and not moving. Team 2 was still advancing toward the colony fence and reporting nothing unusual. Team 3 on the eastern ridge had gone silent 2 minutes ago. He had thought they were in a dead zone communication blackout from the terrain. He called them again now. Silence. He called again. Team 3 respond. Nothing. He switched to Team 4, the team he had sent into the deep forest. Their signal was still active. Their scout leader reported, Team 4 moving through Sector 7. No contact. Forest is clear so far. Wait. A pause. Something on the edge of thermal range, very faint, could be an animal moving to investigate. Negative, Scarval said sharply. Team 4 pull back, do not investigate, return to. The signal from Team 4 went dead. Scarval stood very still. He was a veteran of 11 worlds. He had fought species that had fought back hard species with guns and vehicles and real military training. He had never felt what he was feeling right now, because all of those species had been visible. They had made noise. They had shown up on thermal. They had bled and run and surrendered like prey was supposed to do. This was different. He called Vorathkel on the fleet channel. Commander, I need to report a situation. Vorathkel's voice was slow and unconcerned. What situation, Scarval? We have lost contact with 3 of 4 scout teams. Total of approximately 60 soldiers unaccounted for. No thermal contacts. No audio contacts. No weapons fire detected on our end. He paused. Whatever is in this forest, we cannot see it. A long silence. 60 soldiers, Vorathkel repeated slowly. In under 40 minutes, Commander. Another silence, longer this time. In the colony command room, Sarastal was watching the sensor feed alongside Ilara's second-in-command, a quiet woman named Lieutenant Sierra Holt. Holt was monitoring the comms from the Shadow Fang unit and making small marks on a tactical pad. She said nothing. She just watched and marked. Sarastal leaned over her shoulder and looked at the numbers. His silver eyes went wide. He pointed at the screen with one long finger. Those are Kyrath life signs, he said quietly. They are disappearing. He looked at the count. That many in that time, that is not possible. How? Holt looked up at him. She had a calm face, the kind of face that had long ago made peace with hard things. We train for this kind of environment, she said simply. Dark, fog, close to rain. She looked back at the screen. And we've been doing it for a very, very long time. But the thermal imaging, Sarastal said. Kyrath thermal imaging can detect a single warm body from 300 meters. How are your soldiers not visible? Holt almost smiled. Because they're not warm. Sarastal stared at her. That is not possible. Humans are warm-blooded. Humans are adaptable, Holt said. The suits reduce surface heat signature to near zero. We designed them specifically for encounters against thermal-based detection. It took about 6 months of engineering, she shrugged. We also just move differently. Low, slow, quiet, like something that grew up hunting in the dark. Outside, deeper in the forest, Ilara Voss moved through the black trees like a ghost. She was low to the ground, moving in a slow, smooth crawl that made almost no sound. Her suit was cold against the fog. Her breathing was long and controlled, in for 4 counts, out for 4 counts, so quiet it barely stirred the mist in front of her face. 20 meters ahead, a group of 4 Kyrath soldiers stood in a tight cluster, their rifles pointed outward in all directions. Their thermal visors were on maximum. They were shaking not from cold, but from something they could not name. Ilara watched them for exactly 10 seconds. Then she began to move. The young Kyrath soldier's name was Vreth. He was 23 years old by Kyrath counting, which made him very young for a soldier but not young enough to be excused from a landing mission. He had trained for 4 years. He had heard the stories of what his people had done to other worlds, the great conquests, the surrender ceremonies, the quiet power of standing over a defeated enemy. He had been proud to be part of the expansion fleet. He had wanted to see the galaxy. He had not wanted this. He was alone. He did not know how it had happened. 1 minute he had been with 3 other soldiers in the eastern forest sector. Then there had been a sound soft like cloth brushing bark, and when he turned around the others were gone. No screaming. No weapons fire, just gone like the fog had simply eaten them. He had run. He was not proud of that. But he had run, and now he was crouched behind a thick black tree trunk with his rifle across his chest, and his visor on full thermal, and his 4 eyes scanning every direction as fast as they could move. He could not see anything. The fog sat around him like a quiet wall. The trees rose up on all sides. The ground was wet under his knees. He could hear his own breathing, which was too loud, much too loud, and he tried to slow it down, but it kept coming fast and ragged. He opened his comm. This is Vreth, Team 3. I am alone in Sector 4. My team is gone. I need extraction. Please respond. Static. He tried again, more static. He pressed himself tighter against the tree. He was a predator. His whole species were predators. They had evolved on a harsh world with few rivals. Their bodies were built for hunting. Their senses were excellent. Their armor was strong. He told himself these things quietly in his head because they had always been true and they needed to be true right now. Then he heard the sound. It was very small, the smallest sound, barely a whisper of movement in the fog to his left. He spun toward it, rifle up. Thermal scan, nothing. He held perfectly still. He listened with every bit of focus he had. Silence. Then to his right another whisper. Different direction. He spun again. Thermal, nothing. His chest was tight. His claws were gripping the rifle too hard. He made himself breathe. Then he understood something, and the understanding was the worst thing of all. Whatever was out there was not moving toward him in a straight line. It was not charging. It was not attacking. It was circling, slowly, patiently, like it had all the time in the world, like it was not in any hurry at all, like the outcome had already been decided and the only question was when. Vreth had hunted prey animals on his home world. He had chased them and they had run, and eventually he had caught them. That was how it worked. The prey ran. The predator chased. Nobody had ever circled him. He made a sound he would have been ashamed of in any other moment. A short, sharp cry, quiet but helpless. And then something cold and very fast came out of the dark, and the world went away. The Galactic Council observation feed was being watched by ambassadors from 9 different species. They had all gathered because this was supposed to be a surrender. A simple, clean, quick display of Kyrath power, the kind that happened regularly in the outer territories and always ended the same way. The colonists would give up. The Kyrath would take the world. Life would go on. Instead, they were watching the Kyrath life signs disappear from the sensor map, one by one. Ambassador Sarastal had stopped talking. He stood in front of the main screen with his long green hands clasped together, his silver eyes unblinking. The room had gone very quiet. Every few minutes another cluster of orange dots, each one a Kyrath soldier, would simply stop moving and then fade. "How many is that now?" asked Ambassador Cravel, a wide blue alien from the Pelish Collective who had 3 mouths and usually used all of them at once. Right now he was using none of them. He was whispering. 94, said Lieutenant Holt, without looking up from her console. In how long? 2 hours and 17 minutes. Cravel was quiet for a moment. The Kyrath have a famous warrior division, he said slowly. The Kreth Guard. They are the personal hunters of the fleet commander. They have never been deployed on a colonial world because it is considered unnecessary. He paused. I believe Vorathkel is about to deploy them. Sarastal turned to look at him. Has the Kreth Guard ever failed a mission? No, said Cravel. In recorded galactic history, the Kreth Guard has never failed. Both of them looked at Lieutenant Holt. Holt was marking something on her pad. She did not look up. Lieutenant, Sarastal said quietly, are you concerned about the Kreth Guard? Holt thought about it for a second. Commander Voss has been briefed on the Kreth Guard for the last 8 months, she said. She specifically requested intelligence reports on their tactics, their gear, their movement patterns, and their known weaknesses. Now she looked up. She's been planning for this night for a long time. Sarastal's thin mouth opened slightly. She planned for this specific encounter. How could she have known? She didn't know it would be the Kyrath specifically, Holt said. She planned for whoever came, that's what she does. She looked back at her console. That's always what she does. In the forest, the Kreth Guard moved in total silence. There were 20 of them, the best the Kyrath fleet had. They wore a different type of armor from the standard soldiers, lighter, darker, designed for close-range silent killing rather than open battle. Each one carried short blades instead of long rifles. They moved in a wide, overlapping pattern, covering each other's blind spots, watching every angle. Their leader was named Rethvor. He was very old for an active soldier, almost 60 years. And he had the calm, cold look of something that had spent decades being the most dangerous thing in any room. He had been told what was happening in the forest, and he had listened carefully, and then he had said 4 words to Vorathkel before coming down. We will end this. He was not afraid of humans. He knew about humans. They were a new species, barely 2 centuries in space. Short lives, soft bodies, no natural armor. They were clever, yes. All the reports said so, But clever did not beat experienced. Clever did not beat ancient. Clever did not beat 20 Kreth guards in the dark. He moved through the fog with perfect ease. His visor was switched off. He did not need thermal. He had something better, 60 years of hunting in environments worse than this. His senses were finely tuned. He could feel changes in air pressure. He could hear a heartbeat at 15 meters. He stopped. He could hear something. It was very faint, a breathing pattern, slow, controlled, human, somewhere ahead and to the left, roughly 20 meters away. He signaled his team without words, using only finger movements. 4 of them peeled off to circle wide around the left. 3 went right. The rest followed him straight ahead, slow and steady. He was almost smiling. This was what he was built for. This was the oldest thing in the universe, the quiet, patient closing of a trap. He moved forward another 5 meters. The breathing was louder now, almost directly ahead. He crouched low and moved toward it, one careful step at a time. Then the breathing stopped. Not faded, not moved, just stopped, clean and sudden like someone had turned off a switch. HFY froze. The air changed. He could not explain it. Nothing moved. Nothing made a sound. But something in the deep part of his brain, the old part, the part that had kept his ancestors alive for thousands of years, sent one single clear signal. You are the prey. He spun around fast, faster than most soldiers half his age. His blade came up. There was nobody there. But the 4 soldiers he had sent to circle left were gone. And the 3 he had sent right were gone. And the soldiers behind him were. Something hit him from above, from the tree. He had not looked up. He had not thought to look up. Alara dropped from the branch above HFY like a stone, landed on him with both knees, drove him into the ground hard and fast, and had the cold pulse collar around his neck before he could get his arms free. The collar locked. He went still immediately, not unconscious, but unable to move anything below his shoulders. It disrupted the nerve signals in the Kyreth exoskeleton. She crouched over him for a second. He looked up at her with his 4 yellow eyes. She looked back. You looked forward, she said quietly. You should have looked up. She stood and clicked her comm. 11 of 20 secured, 9 still active in the north grid. She checked her wrist display. 4 hours left until dawn, moved to phase 3. She stepped over HFY and walked into the fog without looking back. Behind her, the old Kyreth warrior lay still on the wet ground and stared up at the black branches above him and thought, for the first time in his long and violent life, that he understood what every small animal on every world he had ever hunted must have felt in its final moments. Small outthought outpaced. Prey. Vorethkel stood on the bridge of his flagship and did not speak for a long time. The reports had been coming in for hours. Scout teams gone. The Kreth Guard neutralized. 160 of his soldiers either captured, incapacitated, or missing in a forest on a colony world that was supposed to take 3 hours to break. He had fought wars. He had crushed civilizations. He had stood on the surface of 14 worlds and watched their defenders kneel before him. He had never seen anything like this. His senior officers stood around the command table in silence. Nobody offered suggestions. Nobody made eye contact with him. They had all learned over many years of serving under Vorethkel that there were moments when silence was the only safe thing to offer. This was one of those moments. Their commander's face was very still, which was always the most dangerous sign. Anger they could handle. Stillness was different. Send me every piece of intelligence we have on human military operations, he said finally. His voice was low and flat. Everything, going back 20 years. Commander, said his intelligence officer, a sharp-eyed younger soldier named Keth, we have some records from border incidents, mostly minor skirmishes, nothing on this scale. Pull it all. Keth moved fast. Within minutes, files were scrolling across the command table, reports from border patrols, notes from planetary surveys, a few first contact reports from allied species. Vorethkel moved through them slowly, reading without reacting. Most of it was nothing. Small incidents, a human patrol that had escaped an ambush, a colony that had resisted a pirate raid, nothing that suggested what was happening right now. Then he found something. It was a note from an allied species called the Veth, who had colonized near human territory about 40 years ago. The Veth were a peaceful species, not fighters, but careful observers. The note was from a Veth researcher who had spent time studying human history, specifically the early period before they reached space. It was short. Vorethkel read it twice. The most unusual thing about humans, the note said, is not their intelligence or their technology, which are both impressive but not unique in the galaxy. The most unusual thing is what they were before all of that. For over 100,000 years, before cities, before writing, before any of the things we associate with civilization, humans were hunters. They lived in the dark. They chased prey across vast distances on foot. They used no claws, no natural armor, no special senses. Only patience, planning, and a remarkable ability to endure discomfort without stopping. They were not the fastest or the strongest things in their environment, but they outlasted everything else. Their prey would exhaust itself. Their prey would panic. Their prey would make a mistake, and the humans would still be there, quiet and steady, waiting for that moment. The researcher had added one final line at the bottom. What concerns me is not the human as a civilized species. What concerns me is what happens if the civilized layer is removed. What is underneath it? What they have always been. Vorethkel set down the report. He looked at the sensor screen showing the forest on Verath 7. The orange dots of his soldiers had mostly stopped disappearing because there were very few left in the forest. The humans had moved through his forces like water moving through sand. Clean, quiet, patient. He thought about how he had laughed at the human commander when she had asked for one night. He had made a mistake, not a tactical mistake. There had been no way to fully predict this. He had made the mistake of assuming. He had looked at humans and seen a young species, soft and new, barely worth serious attention. He had seen what they looked like on the surface. He had not thought to ask what they were underneath. He was thinking about it now. He stood up from the command table. "Prepare my personal landing shuttle," he said. The silence on the bridge deepened. Keth looked up slowly. "Commander." "You heard me." "Sir, with respect, your personal safety is not your concern right now." Vorethkel turned and looked at his officers. "I am going to the surface. I will deal with this human commander personally. I will end this before dawn." He looked around the table. 12 of my personal honor guard will come with me. The rest of you will hold position here. If I do not return to the ship by first light, you will destroy the colony from orbit." He paused. "But I will return." None of them said anything. He walked off the bridge. In the forest, Alara received the alert from Holt at the same moment her sensors picked up a new landing craft coming down from the flagship. She stopped moving. She looked at her wrist display. One ship, small, moving to land at the original drop zone. She zoomed in on the signal. One very large heat signature, much larger than standard soldiers. 12 more with it. She understood immediately. She clicked her comm to the full unit channel. "Shadow Fangs, this is Voss. New development. The fleet commander has come down personally. He is landing now at the original LZ with a 12-man honor guard." She paused. "This is the trap we wanted. He thinks he is hunting us. We are going to let him believe that for exactly as long as it is useful." She looked at the forest around her. 3 hours and 20 minutes until dawn. Move into Phase 4 positions. Ghost Protocol. Nobody does anything until I give the word. Am I clear? Quiet affirmations came through the comm from her soldiers, spread out through the dark forest, invisible, waiting. "Good," she said. "Give him room to feel comfortable." Vorethkel stepped out of the landing craft into the cold fog of Verath 7 and felt the planet's darkness settle around him like a heavy coat. He had been on worse worlds, hotter, colder, more hostile. He had no fear of environments. He activated his battle suit's full sensor array and looked at the tree line ahead. His honor guard fanned out around him, weapons ready, visors scanning. These were his best. He had no doubt they could handle whatever was in that forest. He walked forward toward the trees and raised his voice. He did not use a comm. He simply spoke, loud and clear, into the dark. Shadow Fang. He said the name carefully, giving each word its full weight. I know that humans have good hearing. I know you can hear me. I have come down personally, a thing I have not done since the conquest of the Reth system 30 years ago. Do you understand what that means? It means I respect you enough to come myself. He stopped at the tree line and looked into the mist. Show yourself. Fight me like a warrior. You have earned that much. Silence. The fog moved slowly. The trees made small sounds in the wind. No, he said, still hiding, still running in the dark. He took a few steps into the trees. That is not courage, that is. The soldier on his far left vanished. Vorethkel heard nothing. He turned and the soldier was simply not there anymore. No crash, no cry, just gone. He turned back. His remaining 11 guards were pressing closer together. Spread out, he told them sharply. Hold your positions, do not cluster. They spread. For 3 minutes, nothing happened. Then 2 more disappeared from opposite sides of the formation at almost exactly the same time. Vorethkel raised his rifle and pointed it at the trees and saw nothing. Over the next 20 minutes, one by one, his honor guard disappeared. He heard none of them fall. He saw none of them taken. They were simply there and then not there, like candles going out in the dark. Each time he spun toward a sound or a movement, he found nothing. Each time he thought he had tracked something, it was gone. He was alone. He stood in the middle of the black forest in the cold fog on a dark planet at 3 in the morning, surrounded by nothing. And for the first time in his very long and very violent life, Vorethkel felt something he had no word for. I know what you are doing, he said quietly into the dark. You are letting me feel it, the way prey feels. His voice was steady. He was too old and too proud for it not to be. You want me to understand? Yes, said a voice directly behind him. He spun, faster than most beings his size could manage, blade already in motion. He hit nothing. But in spinning, he exposed the back of his neck, the one place in Kyrath battle armor where the plating had a small gap, needed for movement. A gap exactly large enough for a very precisely placed EMP blade. He felt the sharp contact of the blade tip, then a deep, full-body vibration that locked every system in his armor and dropped him to his knees. His legs would not respond. His arms were stiff. His weapons were dead. He was on the ground, upright, looking at the fog. Alara Voss stepped in front of him and crouched down so they were at eye level. She was smaller than he had expected. She looked tired, not from fear, but from a long night of work. Her face was calm and steady. Her gray eyes looked at him the same way they looked at everything, like she was measuring it, understanding it, putting it in the right place in her mind. She looked at him for a long moment. Your armor is locked, she said quietly. Your guards are alive and secured. Your ground forces are neutralized. She tilted her head slightly. Dawn is in 40 minutes. Vorethkel looked back at her. His 4 eyes were steady even now. You planned all of this, he said. It was not a question. For 8 months, she said. The EMP blade, the heat suits, the tree positions. He was quiet for a moment. You knew I would come down. I hoped you would, she said. Commanders like you don't like losing. You come to fix it yourself. It was a reasonable guess. He was quiet for another moment. The fog moved around them both. The forest was very still. What happens now? He asked. Alara stood up. She looked at the sky, where the very first, faintest change in the darkness told her that dawn was not far away. Now, she said, we walk back to the colony, and you tell your fleet to stand down. She reached down and tapped the collar around his neck, the same kind she had used on Rethvor, and it locked softly into place. Then she looked at him one more time. "You asked me to show myself," she said, "to fight like a warrior." She picked up her gear and turned to walk. "I did. This is how we fight." She walked forward into the thinning dark. Vorethkel, with no choice and no armor and the long weight of a lost knight behind him, followed. The sun came up slowly on Varath 7. It did not rise the way it did on warmer worlds, bright and fast, painting the sky in reds and oranges. Here the light crept in carefully, like it was not sure it was welcome. The gray sky went from black to dark gray to a pale, washed-out silver. The fog did not go away. It just became lighter, thinner, easier to see through. The black trees stood in long rows in the mist, quiet and still, and the wet ground caught the early light in small patches. The colonists came out of their shelters slowly. They had not slept. Most of them had spent the night sitting in the emergency bunkers under the colony buildings, listening to the quiet above them and waiting for the sound of weapons fire that never came. When the all-clear came through the speaker system at first light, they came out carefully, blinking in the pale morning, and looked at each other and did not quite know what to feel. Some of them gathered near the command building. They saw the soldiers coming out of the forest. The Shadow Fang unit walked in from the trees in ones and twos, moving slowly now, the long, careful tension of the night finally leaving their bodies. They were dirty, mud on their suits, fog damp on their helmets, dark rings under their eyes. Some of them were limping slightly from hours of moving low and quiet through rough terrain. But they were all there. Every one of them. 40 soldiers, 40 returned. The colonists watched them come in. An old farmer named Dars, who had lived on Varath 7 for 9 years and had not slept since the Kyrath fleet appeared, looked at the soldiers and said nothing. He could not find the words. He just stood with his hat in his hands and watched. At the back of the line, walking without hurry and without expression, came Alara Voss. Beside her, in locked armor with a collar at his throat and 4 yellow eyes that looked straight ahead and not at the ground, walked Vorethkel, the High Commander of the 7th Expansion Fleet of the Kyrath Empire, who had conquered 11 worlds and never lost a war, walked into a small human colony on a dark, foggy planet at dawn, as a prisoner. A sound went through the small crowd of colonists, not a cheer, something quieter than that, something between relief and disbelief. Some people covered their mouths with their hands, some just stared. Alara walked past them without stopping. She had work to do. Inside the command room, the screens were still live. The council ambassadors were still watching. They had been watching all night. Most of them had expected to be observing a surrender by midnight. Instead, they had watched, in complete silence, as the Kyrath life signs had disappeared from the sensor map one by one, as reports had come in from Skarval, and then from the Kreth Guard, and then from Vorethkel's personal honor guard, each one more impossible than the last. They had watched the fleet commander himself go into the forest and not come back out the same way. Now they watched him walk through the door of the human colony command building. Ambassador Sarastal had not said a word in over 2 hours. He was standing very straight, his long green hands folded in front of him, his silver eyes unblinking. He watched Alara bring Vorethkel into the room and stop him in the center, in front of the main screen. Alara looked at Vorethkel. "Tell your fleet to stand down." Vorethkel looked at the screen. He looked at the faces of the council ambassadors watching from their feeds. He looked at Corporal Marsh, who was sitting at the communication panel with his hands on the controls, ready. He looked at Alara, who looked back at him with the same level, measuring expression she had worn all night. He drew a slow breath. "Open the channel to my fleet," he said. Marsh opened it. Vorethkel looked into the camera. When he spoke, his voice was controlled, no waver in it, nothing that would suggest anything but a deliberate choice. He was too old and too proud for anything else. "This is Vorethkel. Stand down all weapons. Hold position in orbit. No further action is to be taken against this colony." A pause. "I am authorizing a ceasefire effective immediately." The channel closed. The room was very quiet. Sarastal let out a long, slow breath. He looked at Alara. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Finally he said, "Commander Voss, how?" Alara was checking her gear, unclipping things, setting them on the table. She did not look up immediately. When she did, her expression was thoughtful, like she was choosing her words carefully. "We trained for it," she said simply. "No," Sarastal said. He shook his long green head. "No, that is not a complete answer. We have many species who train. The Kyrath train harder than anyone. This was something different." He stepped forward slightly. "Your soldiers moved through the forest for 8 hours without being detected by thermal imaging, without making detectable sound, against one of the most experienced military forces in the galaxy. I want to understand how that is possible." Alara was quiet for a moment. She looked at Vorath Kel, who was standing still in the center of the room, listening. Then she looked at Sarastal. "How old is your species?" she asked. Sarastal blinked. "The Thari have been spacefaring for approximately 3,000 years. And before that, we were a farming civilization, peaceful, settled." He tilted his head. "Why?" Alara walked to the window. Outside, the pale gray light of morning was spreading across the wet ground. The colonists were moving around out there now, slowly, quietly, starting the work of a new day. "Humans have been in space for about 200 years, she said. "We've been a settled civilization for about 10,000 years before that." She paused. "But before that, for 100,000 years, before cities, before farming, before writing, we were hunters. We chased animals on foot across open land. We didn't have the fastest legs or the best eyes or claws or armor. We weren't the biggest or the strongest things in our environment. Not even close." She turned back to face the room. "But we were patient. We could run for a very long time without stopping. We could plan ahead not just for the next few seconds, but for hours, for days. We understood how animals thought. We understood fear. We understood that the moment prey starts to panic, it starts to make mistakes, and we were good in the dark." She said it without drama, just as a fact. "We grew up in the dark. We learned to read it, to use it, to feel comfortable in it when other things weren't." She glanced at Vorath Kel. "You evolved as hunters too, but you evolved as pack hunters in the open. You are built for the chase, the open chase, thermal imaging, numbers, speed. You are very, very good at that." She looked at the window again. "The dark forest at night is not your environment. It is ours. It has always been ours. We just brought it with us to space." The room was silent for a long time after she stopped speaking. Cravel, the wide blue ambassador with 3 mouths, was the first to say something. His voice was very small. "Are all human soldiers like your unit?" Alara shook her head. "My unit is trained specifically for this kind of operation. Not all soldiers are, but the instinct is in all of us. Given the right conditions and the right training, yes, most humans can do a version of this." She almost smiled, and it was a very small, tired smile. "We just usually don't have a reason to." Sarastal looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Vorath Kel. Vorath Kel had been standing still through all of it, listening. He had said nothing since giving the stand-down order. But now he spoke. He looked at Alara and he asked the question that had been sitting in him since the moment she had put the blade to the back of his neck. "You could have killed me," he said. "In the forest, you had complete advantage. Why didn't you?" Alara looked at him steadily. "Because dead commanders don't give stand-down orders," she said. "And I wanted your fleet to stand down." She held his gaze. "That was always the goal, not to kill, to end the threat, with as little damage as possible on both sides." Vorath Kel said nothing for a moment. Then, very quietly, he said, "You planned all of this to end in a room with no casualties." "On our side, yes, 0 casualties." She picked up her jacket from the table. "Your ground forces are alive and secured. Your honor guard is alive. You are alive." She looked at him steadily. "That was not an accident. I did not want a massacre. I wanted a message." "And what is the message?" She put her jacket on. She looked at him one final time, and for a moment the room was completely still. The fleet commander of the most powerful empire in the known galaxy, and one quiet, tired human woman in a damp jacket who had spent the night in the fog. "The message," she said, "is that the next fleet that shows up over a human colony should think very carefully about what night means on that planet." She turned toward the door, and whether they want to find out. She walked out. The Kyrath fleet left orbit above Vareth 7 2 days later, after a formal ceasefire agreement was processed through the Council. Vorethkel was released as part of the agreement, alive, uninjured, and very quiet for the entire transport back to his fleet. His soldiers were returned to him as well. He had agreed to withdraw the colonial demand, and to report to the Kyrath Empire's Central Command that Vareth 7 was, in the language of the formal record, not suitable for expansion. Word spread through the Galactic Council faster than any official report could travel. Ambassadors told other ambassadors. Intelligence services filed detailed notes. Species who had been watching the sensor feeds that night talked about what they had seen, and the stories grew as stories always do. But the core of it stayed the same: 40 humans, one night, one of the greatest military forces in the galaxy, and a result that had never happened before in 3,000 years of Kyrath conquest. Sarastal filed a very long and very careful report to the Council's Central Committee. At the end of it, he wrote one paragraph that he marked personal, not official, just his own observation as a being who had watched the whole night unfold from a room above a dark forest. "I have spent my career in diplomacy," he wrote, "and I have always believed that understanding a species means understanding their history and their technology and their social structures. I was wrong, or at least incomplete. To understand humans, you must understand what they were, not what they are now: the cities, the ships, the diplomatic protocols. What they are underneath all of that. They are patient. They are comfortable in the dark. They do not panic. And when they decide that something needs to end, they plan for it carefully, quietly, and completely, long before anyone else realizes a decision has been made." He paused and then added, "I am very glad they are on our side." On Vareth 7, the colonists went back to their work. The farms needed attention. The mining operations had fallen behind schedule. There was a lot to rebuild and organize after 2 days of emergency protocol. People were tired, and they wanted to sleep and eat and see that their children were all right, and let the fear of the last 2 days settle slowly out of their bodies. Ilara Voss sat on the roof of the command building in the early morning light of the 3rd day. She had a cup of coffee that was going cold in her hands. She was looking at the forest. The fog was thinner today, still there, still slow and quiet, but lighter. The black trees stood in their long rows, silent and unchanged. Corporal Marsh came up through the roof hatch and stood beside her. He looked at the forest too. "Message from Central Command," he said. "Commendation for the unit, talk of a formal ceremony, medals." He glanced at her. "The good kind, apparently." Ilara said nothing. Marsh looked at her for a moment. "Are you all right, Commander?" She thought about it honestly, the way she always thought about things, carefully, without rushing. "I'm tired," she said. "That's fair," said Marsh. They stood there in the quiet morning for a while. Below them, the colony was waking up. Someone was cooking something. The smell of it drifted up from an open window. A child was laughing somewhere on the other side of the fence. A work vehicle started up and began moving toward the eastern fields. Normal sound, safe sounds. Ilara drank her cold coffee and looked at the forest and thought about nothing in particular for a while. That was a skill too, one of the oldest ones. Knowing when the work was done. Knowing how to be still. The fog moved through the trees. The pale sun climbed slowly above the gray sky. The night was over. And